They thought she was just another woman walking her dog along the trail. That was their first mistake. The morning had started the way most mornings did for Corporal Tessa Hargrove, or rather, the way mornings used to start, before everything changed, before the discharge papers, before the physiotherapy sessions at the base in Petawawa that smelled like rubber mats and institutional coffee, before she'd packed up the last of her kit, returned her ID card, and driven 6 hours west to a rented house in a town outside Thunder Bay where nobody knew her name or her rank or what she'd done in the Panjwai district in 2019. The only one who knew all of it was Kodiak. He walked ahead of her now on the gravel path that cut through Centennial Park, his dark nose sweeping the cold October air in long methodical arcs. He was a Belgian Malinois, 72 pounds of muscle and nerve endings, wrapped in a brindle coat that had gone slightly grey at the muzzle. He had a scar behind his left ear from a piece of shrapnel he'd caught near Kandahar. Tessa had the matching scar on her shoulder. They'd been inseparable since the day the unit's dog handler had been medevaced, and someone had to take Kodiak's lead. That someone had been a 23-year-old signals corporal who'd never worked with a MWD before. Kodiak had spent the first 2 hours sizing her up with those amber eyes, patient and ancient and slightly contemptuous, and then somewhere around hour 3, he'd simply leaned his weight against her leg, and that had been that. 6 years later, he was the only living thing on the planet Tessa trusted without reservation. She wore civilian clothes, dark cargo pants, a grey fleece, trail runners that had logged more kilometers than any sensible person would count. Her auburn hair was pulled back under a baseball cap. Nothing about her looked remarkable. That was, she supposed, the whole point of coming to a town where nobody looked twice at a woman, walking a large dog along a public trail on a Tuesday morning. The park was mostly empty. It was just past 7, overcast in the particular flat way that late autumn Ontario does overcast. Like the sky had simply given up trying. The maples had dropped most of their leaves, which lay in sodden drifts along the path. Somewhere behind the tree line, the Trans-Canada Highway hummed its constant, indifferent note. Kodiak paused, ears swiveling. Tessa noticed. She didn't look. She adjusted the drawstring on her fleece and kept walking, cataloguing the information the way she'd been trained to. 3 sets of footsteps on gravel, closing from the left. Male, she assessed, from the weight distribution and stride length. Not running. Angling to intercept, she gave it 30 seconds. Hey. The voice came from a man in a Carhartt jacket who'd stepped off the side path to put himself in her way. He had a patchy beard and the specific confidence of someone who'd never once been told no by someone they thought was beneath them. 2 others flanked him a few steps back. The taller one had a blue toque pulled low over pale eyes. The third was younger, maybe 19, trying very hard to look like the other 2. Kodiak sat. He didn't growl. He didn't need to. Nice dog, Carhartt said. He wasn't looking at the dog. Tessa stopped. Morning. You live around here. Does it matter? He smiled at that, the kind of smile that was really just the face a man makes when he's deciding how much of what he's thinking to let out. Just being friendly, the path's wide enough for all of us, Tessa said, and started to move around him. He stepped sideways, not dramatically, just enough. Kodiak's ears went flat, then back up, flat again. He was reading the geometry of the situation the way he always did, cataloguing threats by posture and proximity, running calculations I couldn't fully follow but had learned to trust absolutely. Where you headed? The taller one said, blue toque. She filed him under. Trail runs about 4 more kilometers, she said. I'm going to walk most of it. I'd like to get started. Pretty early to be out here alone. Carhartt glanced at Kodiak. Though I guess you got your little guard dog. He's not little, the young one said, almost involuntarily, and Carhartt shot him a look that shut him up. Tessa took stock of them. Carhartt was the one she'd have to watch. He had the particular stillness of someone who'd thrown punches before and wasn't nervous about it. Blue Toque was an enforcer, bigger but slower, following rather than leading. The young one wasn't a threat unless he was handed something and told what to do with it. She noticed, as she always noticed, the slight bulge at Carhart's hip. Jacket was open. "Nice morning for a walk," she said. "I'm going to keep going now." She moved left. "He moved left," he said, and his voice had changed slightly, dropped a register the way voices do when the pretense is over. "We've been watching this park for a couple weeks. You and your dog, you're here every Tuesday and Thursday 7 o'clock, regular as a clock." That was true. She'd been sloppy about it. She'd known, on some level, that she'd been sloppy about it, but she'd let herself believe that the routines were helping her hold herself together, and she hadn't been willing to give them up. "Good for you," she said. "The thing is, there's something in this park we need, and your dog's gonna pick it up." "Dog like that?" He gestured toward Kodiak with his chin. "He's trained, right? Police dog or something?" "He's a pet," Tessa said. Blue Toke made a sound. "He's a trained military working dog," Carhart said, "and somebody paid a lot of money to know where he ended up. A dog that can track through 2 meters of snowpack don't just disappear when the army's done with him." He paused. "Neither do the people who handle them." Something went quiet inside Tessa. Not fear. She hadn't felt actual fear in a long time. It was more like a door closing very softly in a room where everything is still. They knew who she was, or they knew enough. "I'm going to need you to understand something," she said. Her voice was even. She'd been told before that it was unnerving when her voice went even like that. A sergeant major had told her once that she sounded like a pilot announcing turbulence 30 seconds before impact, like she already knew exactly what was coming and had made her peace with it. "I'm going to walk past you. Kodiak is going to walk past you. And nothing is going to happen this morning that any of us can't take back." Carhart looked at the dog. His expression was calculating. "Touch him," he said, "and we put him down before you can reach us." The cold in Tessa's chest spread through her rib cage. She had been in contact. She had been in firefights. She had done things in service of her country that she'd signed papers agreeing never to discuss in any detail with any civilian for the rest of her natural life. She had held Kodiak in a field west of Massam Gar, while a medic worked on the shrapnel wound behind his ear, and she had pressed her face into his fur and made the kind of promises you make when you think something you love might not make it through the night. He had made it through the night. "Last chance," she said. "Walk away." Blue Toke snorted. "Lady, there's 3 of us!" Tessa looked at him. Just looked. Blue Toke seemed to find, suddenly, that the middle distance was very interesting. Carhart reached under his jacket. Kodiak moved. It wasn't what most people imagined when they imagined a dog attacking. There was no snarling, no dramatic launch from a standstill. Kodiak was beside her, and then he simply wasn't, and the sound of impact was immediate and dense. 72 pounds of working dog hitting Carhart's center mass before his hand cleared his jacket, taking him straight to the gravel. The man hit hard. Tessa was already moving. Blue Toke was bigger, and that made him slower, and she'd counted on both. She came in low and inside his reach. He threw a wide hook, the wrong choice for the distance, and she slipped under it, 2 hands on his jacket, hip check, and his own momentum did most of the work. He went down sideways and she followed him, 1 knee on his back, 1 hand on the back of his neck, pressing his face into the wet leaves. He said something into the ground that she couldn't make out and didn't need to. The young one had his phone out. He wasn't filming, he was calling someone. "Put it down," she said. He looked at her. He looked at Kodiak, who had Carhart pinned with the focused professional attention of a dog who has done this before, and will do it again without hesitation or remorse. He put the phone down. Tessa reached into her pocket one-handed, keeping Blue Toke's face in the leaves, and produced a zip tie. She'd carried zip ties in her pockets every day for 12 years, the way some people carry chapstick. She had it on his wrists before he had time to register what she was doing. She stood. Kodiak looked at her. "Kodiak. Ouse." "Release." He backed off Carhart with the efficient, unhurried energy of a dog who'd simply completed a task. Carhart's weapon, a compact optic loaded safety still on, lay in the gravel 2 feet from his right hand where Kodiak's first strike had sent it. He was staring at the sky and breathing in short, shallow bursts. Tessa picked up the firearm with 2 fingers by the barrel and set it on the ledge of a nearby park bench, out of reach. He sat down on the gravel. "What's in the park?" she said. "Tell me now." He looked at the other 2. Neither of them were in a condition to object. "I don't. You walked out here with 2 men and a loaded weapon at 7 in the morning to intercept a woman and a dog," Tessa said. "You knew my schedule. You knew about Kodiak's training history. Someone told you to be here, and that someone knows where I live." She kept her voice level. "So you're going to tell me what's in this park?" He was 19, maybe 20. He was shaking. She registered that and adjusted accordingly, not softening what she was asking, but setting her posture back slightly, reducing the immediate physical threat her body was broadcasting. She'd learned that in Petawawa, in a room with a whiteboard and a very patient sergeant, who'd explained that there were interrogation techniques that didn't involve the thing most people imagined when they heard the word interrogation. "Cash," he said finally, "under the maintenance shed by the east lot, about 30 meters in on the north side. What kind of cash?" He swallowed. "I don't know all of it," Eve said. He stopped. "Yves," she said. "Yves Caron. He runs things. He moves things across the border, the Quebec side. And he needed the dog because the last shipment was buried and he couldn't. He said a trained tracker was worth 50,000 to the right buyer and that someone tipped him off that there was a handler out here with a former MWD who could—" "Who tipped him off?" she said. He shook his head. She believed him. He genuinely didn't know. She stepped back, took out her phone, dialed a number from memory. She never stored it, and listened to it ring 3 times before it picked up. "It's Hargrove," she said. "Centennial Park, Thunder Bay. East maintenance shed, north face, 30 meters in. I've got 3 men down, 1 firearm recovered, 1 miner who's cooperating. The cash is intact." She listened. "No, I'm not hurt." She glanced at Kodiak, who was sitting beside her left foot with the patient, settled attention of a dog who has done the important thing and is now waiting to find out what comes next. Neither is the dog. She listened again. "I'll hold the scene." She hung up. The young man. She'd find out later his name was Kyle Berthiaume, 20 years old, from Sudbury. 3rd time he'd crossed paths with Yves Caron's operation, and the 1st time he'd been caught anywhere near the actual cargo was staring at her. "You're not just some lady with a dog," he said. "No," she agreed. Carhart had managed to sit up. He was holding his ribs with both hands. "Who are you?" Tessa didn't answer that. She never answered that. She had a specific talent for making the answer to that question feel, somehow, like it would take longer than the person's asking had available. Blue Toke said something hostile from the ground. She ignored him. "Is the dog going to bite me again?" Carhart said. "Not unless you make a choice that requires it," Tessa said. He seemed to find this a satisfying enough answer. He stayed where he was. It was 14 minutes before the RCMP vehicles came down the access road, lights on but sirens off. There were 2 marked units and 1 plain car. The plain car was driven by a man Tessa knew, technically. She'd spoken with him 3 times by phone, once in person, and had a working relationship with him that neither of them had ever named. Inspector Claude Beaulieu was 53 years old, and had the face of a man who had been disappointed by many things, but had decided not to be disappointed by this particular thing. He stepped out of the car, looked at the scene, 2 men restrained on the ground, 1 sitting on the gravel, Tessa standing with Kodiak, and nodded once, the way people nod when a situation is more or less what they were told to expect. Corporal Hargrove, Inspector, the cash, East maintenance shed. The kid knows the specifics. She gestured toward Kyle Berthiaume, who had clearly not expected to end up in a sentence with the word kid. He looked, suddenly, very young. Beaulieu walked toward her while his officers moved to take custody of the 3 men. He stopped at a reasonable distance, which she appreciated. He was one of the few people who'd learned without being told that she needed a certain amount of clearance in a conversation to function properly. Some people needed eye contact, some people needed to be touched on the arm. Tessa needed approximately 2 arm lengths of uncontested personal space. "You're all right," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, the dog." She looked at Kodiak. Kodiak looked at her. "He's good." Beaulieu nodded. He looked at Carhart being walked toward a patrol vehicle. "We've been following the Coron network for 8 months. They've been using natural park spaces across the northwest. Sleeping Giant, Quetico, a couple of spots in the Shield. Moving product across the Quebec border, mostly. Hiding quantities in Crown land where dog units don't normally sweep. Except you had a dog unit in range," Tessa said. "We had intelligence that they were looking for assets to help them locate the last shipment." "When your name came up," he paused. "It wasn't coincidence that you ended up in Thunder Bay, Corporal." She looked at him. "We needed someone near the cache. Someone who could cover the approach without looking like coverage. You were." He seemed to choose his next word carefully. "Ideal. The thing that would have been in another version of her life. Anger was present somewhere in the architecture of her chest. She could feel it the way you can feel a wall in a dark room without seeing it. She'd been placed here. Her routines. The Tuesday-Thursday schedule. Centennial Park at 7 in the morning. Hadn't been sloppy. They'd been managed. Someone had, she said. Administrative, Beaulieu said. Your records and service history remain intact. What was filed is contingent. Contingent on what? On this. He looked at Kodiak. On him. Tessa was quiet for a moment. Kodiak leaned his weight against her left leg. She thought about the drive to Thunder Bay, about the rented house, and the physiotherapy appointments, and the coffee at the Tim Hortons on the lakeshore that she'd bought every Tuesday and Thursday morning because it gave the mornings a shape. She thought about what it felt like to be a person with a shape to her mornings. She thought about what it felt like to not be one. The Caron network, she said. Is this the only cache site? No, how many more? Beaulieu looked at her steadily. That would depend on whether you and your dog are available for the next portion of the project. She looked down at Kodiak. He was already looking up at her, ears forward, patient, present, and entirely without doubt about what she was going to say. She'd always envied him that. 2 conditions, she said. Name them. His medical costs are covered through the program. Permanently. Done, and he sleeps where I sleep. Always. No facility kennels, no separation for protocol. He goes where I go, or we don't go. Beaulieu almost smiled. It was a near thing, she could see it at the corner of his eye. I'll have the terms drafted by end of week. The officer were finishing with the scene. One of them was photographing the east maintenance shed. Another was on the radio. The plane car's engine was still running, sending small jets of exhaust into the cold October air. Kyle Berthiaume was being walked to a vehicle. He looked back at Tessa as he went. She didn't know what he was looking for. Maybe he was trying to identify what kind of person she was, now that the situation was resolved. Most people tried to do that afterward, tried to fit her into a category that made the last 30 minutes make sense. She never fit into the category they were reaching for. She bent down and scratched behind Kodiak's ears. The right ear, not the left where the scar was. He closed his eyes and pressed into her hand with the complete and uncomplicated satisfaction of a dog who knows his work is done. Good boy, she said quietly. It wasn't the kind of thing she'd have said 2 years ago. She'd been trained formally and informally out of the habit of talking to the dog the way civilians talked to dogs. But somewhere in the past year, in the rented house, in the flat sky mornings, she'd stopped caring about that. She straightened up. Inspector Beaulieu was waiting, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the tree line where the last of the October leaves still clung to the maples. When do we start? She said. Monday, he said. She looked at Kodiak. He had already turned toward the trail, nose up, already reading something new in the air, already moving forward with that unhurried, purposeful attention that she'd spent 6 years trying to match and never quite managed. She followed him. Behind her, the RCMP units were working the scene, the radios were talking, and the park was slowly filling with the ordinary sounds of an investigation in progress, and Corporal Tessa Hargrove walked her dog down the path through Centennial Park on a Tuesday morning exactly as she had every week for the past 4 months. Exactly as she'd been put there to do.